Stan Tatkin, thank you so much for joining us once again here on the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. So good to see you.
So good to see both of you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's lovely to see you, Stan. Always lovely to see you. Now, it's difficult because you're really busy and there's lots of things going on, but we wanted to just catch up with you about the variety of things. I know you've been writing, I know you've been talking, you've been working very hard with people. Can you just give us a little bit of an insight about what's exciting you right at the moment? What's, sort of really grabbing your attention right now?
Well, we've been doing a lot of training of therapists since COVID. We've been doing everything online. So I don't know if that's exciting, but it is nice to get the word out and to attract people into this work.
Mm-hmm.
In the work, what's been exciting me has been the further focus on not just couples, but the human condition, and following that through studying, anthropology, biological anthropology, cultural anthropology, and neuroscience, and politics and history, and that has really, opened my eyes quite a bit, in a different way, as we apply, the PACT approach to couple therapy, which, is a psychobiological approach, meaning that it's a developmental approach that follows brain development from infancy to old age.
Now, this is something that we've been, on about for a long time, getting a broad context, which it sounds like what you've been doing, even looking at history, and being able to see the client within the broader context of, ultimately the world.
Yes. And going beyond, personality theory, attachment theory, even going beyond, some of the work that we've been focusing on up to this point, which has been, again, along the lines of arousal regulation, developmental neuroscience, and attachment. But I've been finding sort of a greater understanding, at least I think, about the human condition and what I see in systems, and what I see in particular in couple systems and dyadic systems, that seems to be of a greater matter than personality or attachment.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering, I would like to sort of dive deeper into that. But before we do, I'm wondering if we could just, for those that don't know about PACT and your approach, if you could give us a sort of a brief tour of your approach to couples therapy.
Well, it is, like I said, it's a psychobiological approach. So there's a lot of emphasis on one's developmental trajectory. And so that has to do with the first 18 months of life, the first 5 years of life, all the way up. We very, very interested in what happens to people at what age, in terms of their development. We're also looking at what people can and cannot do. It's a capacity model based on social emotional acuity. Some people are better at reading faces than others. Some people are better at using prosody than others. Some people are good at reading interoceptive cues, others not so good, and so on. So there's that neurobiological piece that sometimes has to do with hardware, sometimes has to do with software, depending on what it is. And then we look at people's attachment, which is just safety and security. It's not a personality theory. It's an adaptation to one's environment, starting in infancy, and that adaptation continues, albeit modified, possibly through other relationships throughout the lifespan. And that really just has to do with how one feels when they begin to depend on another person and what they fear. And there's a certain predictable set of defenses that are employed, whether that person is in the distancing group or the clinging group. If we were to divide people in, two major defenses, in attachment, which would also follow in personality theory as well, distancing and clinging. But then we also look at one's ability to regulate oneself. And again, there's a neurobiology behind that. So there's one's ability to regulate oneself and one's ability to co-regulate within a system, like a dyadic system. And there are all different variables and variances. So that is the what is it, or who are we dealing with? Sort of the three pillars, theoretical pillars of PACT. However, the approach is systems, both structural and strategic. It's psychodramatic. We use a lot of informal Ericksonian trance. And there's a lot of social justice theory in our work. There's a lot of psychodynamic and psychoanalytic, particularly American and British object relations, including Kohut. And so it's, we pretty much use everything that would work, but it's all tied together with an idea, and the idea is secure functioning. That's the narrative, that's the therapeutic stance, that's what we're trying to get couples to do, is something called secure functioning.
And I think this is a beautiful and straightforward aspect of finding a central element which is just fundamental to human progression. I mean, secure functioning, if you wanted to say, well, how is it that a species will survive, then that's a pretty good term to it. I really loved in Joseph Ledoux's book, I mean, when you talk about development anthropology, the 4 billion year development of consciousness. But he just made a really simple statement at one stage of what makes a successful organism. And it's one with a high degree of cooperation and a low degree of disturbance or a lack of cooperation,
right,
and disruption. And so this aspect of finding security, finding that sense of connection and the drawing towards, is this also, so just moving now, so this idea of things coming together to create these mechanisms, is that the sort of area we're talking about?
Well, it's interesting you use the word cooperation. That secure functioning is different than secure attachment. Secure functioning is a set of behaviors that amount to what somebody who is secure would employ. But this is regardless of whether you're secure or insecure. Secure functioning is a system that is based on continuous fairness, justice, mutual sensitivity, collaboration, and cooperation at all times. Now, that's very, very hard to do for the human primate, because we can be cooperative and collaborative until we're under a certain amount of stress. And when we're under a certain amount of stress, we revert to what I'm calling a one-person psychological system of me, my, and I, and you. When we do that, we're not particularly friendly. And if two people are doing that, which is the human condition, that's going to happen, and they don't understand how human beings actually work, and they don't repair quickly, they don't fix things quickly, they will accrue threat. And that threat is in the form of memory. That's long-term memory, and builds as a biological matter over time to where people can hardly even be in the room together without their heart rates going above 15 beats, normal. And so there's a problem built into the human condition where we are cooperative and collaborative until it suits us not to be, which is pretty easy for human beings to do.
So when we are under stress and we revert to the one-person psychological system, are we able to train ourselves to be under stress and yet remain collaborative?
Yes, We are able to do that, but it takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a purpose, a single purpose. So if I'm unionizing with you, let's say you and Richard, the union would have to be based on something, would have to be based on a shared idea, shared purpose, and a shared vision. Otherwise, why would I do it? And it would have to be fully interdependent, meaning that all three of us have the same things to lose and the same things to gain. The minute one of us has something, one of us doesn't have the same things to lose or to gain, that's when trouble can start. And so we have to play by the same rules, because it's together we survive and thrive, or together we perish. And so my ability to cooperate and collaborate with you under stress and duress, or in pain, is really dependent upon whether we have a purpose together, a third idea of why we're together, sort of a shared mythology of our purpose. If we don't have that, then when push comes to shove, I'll do what is most convenient, and that is usually in my own interest.
So I'm thinking of soldiers in a battle zone, and the bonding, incredibly strong bonding happening, but they're also in the incredibly, stressful situation.
Yes. And training really is not about being a hot dog and not about being a solo player, but look to the person on your left and right. They're more important than you. They're going to save your life. And everything about the system is interdependent. Same thing with cop car partners, the same thing with the dance troupe, the same thing with figure skating partners. Anytime there's a team, or there's an organization that is centralized around a purpose that everyone's on board with, there can be governance. Otherwise, it's a dictatorship or it's slavery.
Yeah. And this whole aspect of modern culture, taking the capacity for us to have this self-organizing governance, because we extend into such large groups and such large spaces, that we lose the. I find that people with clients that I work with, they lose partly the practice at being the one who is actually responsible, or to have the responsibility to be able to regulate and engage and care in the relationship. But there's also a loss of sort of like the permission to do so. Like, the relationship isn't working, who's going to fix it? So this can become a problem too. You become destabilized, not only in your relationship, but destabilized from your own natural capacities. How much of a problem is that?
Well, there's a central, if I may just take off from that a little.
Yeah.
There's a central problem in dyadic systems, and in the romantic dyadic system, and that has to do with biology. There's a biological matter that gets us together, and that's nature's way of saying, procreate. Nature doesn't have any interest in us being cooperative and collaborative, and so we do. And so that gets us into a relationship, and then the idea of love, that the reason we're together is because of love. That is a faulty idea, because emotions, feelings are not going to keep any union together. In fact, emotions and feelings are often the cause of unions dissolving. Only purpose does. And purpose is something that people set as a bar that they want to achieve, usually in some principled way of behavior that involves character, where we decide this is the right thing to do, even though it will be the hardest to do. This is the best thing we could do, so say the two of us, even though it will be the hardest to do, because there'll be times we won't feel like it. And that's the thing that is lacking in the human pair bonding system, is having a centralized purpose other than love, which comes and goes like the weather. And there's another problem, and that's the attachment system The attachment system seems to be a biological mandate that tells us in one way or the other, I can't quit you. That's not love. People confuse it with love. It is an existential matter of survival, going all the way back to infancy, that it's not logical, rational, but if I lose you, I will die. There's a feeling of that, right? Like of death. And so people will do all sorts of things because of this biological mandate, including being in relationships that are too unfair and too unjust or even abusive.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you first started talking about
I don't know if I answered your question, Richard. Probably didn't.
It was beautiful. No, it was great. As you say, it's great riffing. It's perfect. We'll edit this, edit that out. Matt,
let me get back to the first principle that you spoke about, and that was developmental trajectory. This word trajectory, obviously, it works hand in hand with attachment, but our understanding, I believe, is that neural architecture forms in a certain direction, depending on our early childhood experiences.
Yes.
So can you just expand a little bit about, once our neural architecture is going in a certain direction, how does that, change us in terms of sort of partnering, romantic, bonding in the future?
Well, thankfully, the brain has plasticity, and plasticity for better or worse. Sometimes the plasticity goes towards pathogenesis, right? But relationships change the brain. And so we could say that, good relationships and relatively stress-free relationships can be very healing for the brain. In terms of something that Bruce McEwen has coined, allostatic load, and Robert Sapolsky as well, and Janice Kiko-Glaser. And that is the price we pay for adaptation, the wear and tear that chronic stress, causes on all four major systems. And so couples, because they represent true home. They're always together. They're proxies for everybody that came before. They're the closest thing to the originals. Can have tremendous interpersonal stress, and that creates this high allostatic load. So that can change the brain as well. Hypertrophy of the amygdala, eroding of hippocampal cells because of corticosteroids, changes in the prefrontal cortex, and so on. And then there's, of course, genetics and the way people, different brains. But this thing about developmental trajectory in the first 18 months, the regulatory systems are being built out during that time. And so a lot of people who have, self-regulation problems from the get-go may have a struggle in their lifetime. They can learn to self-regulate much better. But the question of whether someone is going to be really quick on the draw in social situations, because of the experience-dependent right brain, that is, pretty much a center for social emotional function. If people didn't get the nurturing, such as a lot of people who were neglected on the attachment level, I'm not talking about material neglect like Cicchetti babies, but, attachment level, they may not be so good in a pinch. They may not be so good at conflict resolution or, co-regulation. Although many times they'll have a partner that is really good, and they make up the difference because it's a system. And so the system is actually greater than the parts. So it does have a bearing on people's social emotional ability to sense things, to read faces, to put names to emotions, to all this stuff, to empathy. But things are not what they seem, because I study systems, and in systems, we're not as interested in the individual. We're interested in how these two individuals create this sort of intersubjective phenomenology that is hard to understand. The system is reacting to itself, and so it's quite different than dealing with an individual.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hopefully you'll be really pleased with what we've done in our new book, because a lot of this stuff we're talking about.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. But it's what a lot of therapists don't necessarily have a good grasp on. But it's things like, and Matt and I sort of discovered it ourselves as we went in and really sort of got into the details and of these elements. But things like allostatic load. So we take a period of time to talk about that. Emotions. Certainly. I've often asked the question at various conferences and group discussions. Okay, what is an emotion? And there's a lot of stumbling and bumbling around in the answers. So that is addressed, and it's terribly important, this idea of empathy. I mean, there's some wonderful stuff that we found coming out of Galisi from the mirroring, the mirror neurons, one of the mirror neurons guys, talking about this and the way we engage and the differences between this temperament, attachment, and then the personality, these emergent properties that come out. And we keep dealing with these with emergent properties, which aren't necessarily telling us a clear story about what elements within the system are having the difficulty. And this is really what packed the whole process and the different mechanisms you've used, I think, brings out so well. It enables you to sort of somehow pull apart what's happening on the surface, the arguments or the whatever it is, and go, oh, just a minute, we're looking in here. And then this all ties in with your then gauging, we have to look at the developmental trajectory as which you've just so beautifully described.
So much of what we do is investigation. What I tell my students over and over again, we're investigators. The main issue is what is it that we're looking at, not what to do about it, because we can't know what to do unless we really get granular. And so I think the job for a therapist is to be a really good investigator and to leave no stone uncovered, because people are complex. And even though we have our theories, the theories never really refer to a real person. They refer to aggregates of people. And so the study of the people that are in front of us, and one of the tools we use is digital video to study, use frame analysis to study faces and movements and voices, frame by frame, forwards, backwards, and to train our eyes and ears to also watch and pay attention, because it's a real tricky thing. This whole business of theory and then what really is, and so the thing about empathy is that we know many people think of empathy as having to do with a network, particularly a vertical network of brain areas that have to work in conjunction with each other, that it couldn't merely be motor neurons. It would have to be the anterior insula, the anterior cingulate. It would have to be, areas of the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, and so on, and limbic areas, other limbic areas, to be able to actually feel what you feel, which is the deepest kind of empathy. And my body feels what you're feeling, and I'm moved to do something about it because now I'm in pain. It's not right. That's the deepest kind. And there's all these different levels that are hard to evaluate. In couples, the common complaint is my partner doesn't have empathy. And, there are some cases where that could be true-ish, but most of the time it's a relative thing, and it's a perceptual thing that people call out as this person lacks empathy when they have thicker boundaries, emotional boundaries than the other person. Whereas somebody who's overly empathic might have affect contagion and may have thinner boundaries. And so the empathy thing is charged area because it's often used as, as a way to beat people over the head. But there are people that actually with poor empathy, and they were that way from the very, very beginning. And some of those people will never, become empathic, and some of those people can become more empathic when they suffer. I think suffering is the key.
Right. Yeah. So can we talk about some psychopathology here? So I mean, psychopathy comes to mind. You talked about stress causing a one-person psychology.
In all of it.
There's in psychopathy, I mean, they're always in a one-person psychology, right? Let's hear from what experience do you have with psychopathy in the couple's relationship?
Well, I have a lot of experience with antisocials in couples relationship, or people with personality disorder that have antisocial valences. Fortunately, I've only, I think I've only come across people that I would say have true psychopathy, people that would make my blood chill, that kind of thing. And, I'm fascinated with it, but I'm not an expert in this area. There are certain forms of psychopathy that are genetic. Literally problems in the amygdala that they're born with, but moreover problems in the anterior insula, where they don't feel they don't have interoceptive cues of anxiety or fear, and they don't attach. And many of these people who have this genetic component were also abused by their parents, and now they have the antisocial piece too. But there are a lot of pro-social psychopaths. They're in our armed forces many times. They're fearless. So that's about all I can say about psychopathy. In couples, everybody comes to the door. I mean, we get everybody because everybody couples pretty much,
right.
Schizoids, borderlines, schizophrenics, antisocials, everybody. So this one person psychological problem, though, isn't about pathology.
Right.
It's about the human condition. We're threat animals. And so our ability to pick up threat cues through the face, voice, body language, words, phrases, is legendary. And because we're memory animals, and we tend to remember negative things over positive things because of the brain's negativity bias, we're really good at picking up anything that hurts us and remembering it for the next time, and then expanding our cue set for picking up threat. That's the major problem. And if I'm under stress and you are not talking in a way that's collaborative and cooperative with me, I can confuse you as an adversary. And I will too start to talk or behave in a way that thinks only of me, which makes you then do the same. And that is easier than you think. That happens, immediately. And if people don't know how to deal with that or get out of it, then it builds. Right.
I'm guessing awareness that is actually happening is the first step, right?
Awareness, if not during it, then just afterwards, which is what apologies are for.
Right. Yeah.
That's what making amends is for. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, this sort of brings to rise just this concept. We talk about a bit of the orientation, the framework, the attitude, the position your mind is in, which of course tends to determine what you focus on and what you pay attention to, which then in turn builds your sense of reality. I suppose captured by that one, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So because you get also that difficulty of when you become, oh my God, I'm under threat, that of course everything you hear is, you take the threatening aspect of it, captured in that, also that sort of thing. When someone says, oh, you look good today, they say, oh, do I? Well, what was wrong with yesterday?
Right. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, what do you mean by
that? Wrong? Yeah, what was wrong with before?
Yeah, and that thing that I hear quite a bit about different cultures, and America seems to have its fair share of this, is it's almost like a population looking to be offended.
Lately it does, doesn't it?
Well, we see it expressed in there, but we certainly see it in a lot of places around the world in different cultures, and it's not broad ranging, and it can be in different regions and different areas. I mean, the more how you look and so on and so forth is important. The more your external evaluation is important. I suppose the more you get more easily offended because it costs you. And I guess that's where I was sort of leading myself up to. When you're working with the individual, what it the concern about what the difficulties are costing them, what the risk is that it is to them, and that couples coming into relationships saying this other person is now a risk to me. How does PAC work with this sort of danger situation that couples can sometimes get into?
We actually will put them in, we call them containers. These are little tasks, little games, experiments, play, where we put them under pressure to see how they will interact. And what we find is that couples think it's about the topic, money, time, mess, sex, kids, and it really isn't. It's the manner in which they interact as soon as one or both of them are under stress. That repeats. It repeats every time. So we could be talking about the kids or the dishwasher, and the patterns will be the same. The manner in which they address each other, and it'll be at lightning speeds. So we have to bring it to their attention, sometimes with a video playback so they can see and hear what their voices or what their faces are doing. But also coaching with their permission, because everything is done by previous agreement and permission. And that's what we would want them to do as well, is to create agreements and give each other permission to push and limit each other so they can work effectively together. But that's what we'll do, and start to work with things like collaborative speech. The way I talk signals to you I'm pointing at you. And so how do we work on the problem without starting to work on each other? Because as soon as we work on each other, it's war. And that's a very hard thing for most people to learn. It's very natural for us to work on each other and not work on a third thing. If we were in a business or if we were in a team, we wouldn't do that because we know we have bigger fish to fry. And we don't have the time to do that. And we have to work with each other. But couples think they're family. And so family can get away with anything, and they lose their formalities, and they forget they're strangers, right? And they stop doing the things they would afford a stranger, like check information, like certain courtesies, certain things that aren't shortcuts. But because we're energy conserved organisms, in fact, all biology is energy conserved, we do the least amount necessary. And it takes a lot of effort and consciousness to talk and think collaboratively at all times, particularly if we're fatigued or under stress. We'll revert to speaking in a way that's unfriendly, or acting in a way that's unfriendly.
Exactly why my kids are a certain way when they're out in public and a different way when they're at home.
Yes. And you want that, because it would be worrisome if they were like angels at home and murdering people out in the world, right?
And hopefully not vice versa. That's right.
Murdering people at home, yeah.
I love the fact that when you come into a session of yours, it's like coming into a lab, right? and the use of video. How do people respond to the fact that, okay, we're going to be recording this and we're going to be playing back? Does everyone accept that?
Yeah, I see celebrities and political people, and and everybody says yes. The only people who say no, I suspect, are either litigious, paranoid, And in some cases, people from some regions, where they were oppressed by the government, are understandably uneasy.
Yeah.
But the majority of people will be okay with it, especially because we're using it for our purposes in the session. It's a really good tool. It's also a great research tool.
It is.
And a great supervision tool.
Oh, wonderful for supervision. But see, this, this is what I learned in acting school. There's so many elements of this necessity to review what you're doing, to look at, to be able to take to take the discussion as discussion and not as criticism.
Right.
I remember it was quite difficult in acting because directors would tend to only tell you what you weren't doing right. Because obviously, I'm in my early stages, a director was like that, and one of the senior actors, when I was looking upset, they said, "Richard, everything else you're doing is good." And I went, I see. And of course, this is something that manifests in relationships as well. This the destructive nature of criticism, because of how it ties in to those feelings of those traumatic experiences. The current criticism seems to find its way and light up so many things from your history that it gets difficult.
Absolutely. Again, memory. So if by the way, I went through acting school too. I went to conservatory, so I got beat up a lot. It was a great training, though,
wasn't it, for everybody? Ernest Rossi went to the Actors Company. I mean, goodness gracious me, But
it's
yes, so it is. So please continue. Yeah.
But I know from my own experience. I was bullied by an older brother who I love and adore. And so being sensitive to criticism, I know what that's like. As I've grown older, part of, walking the talk of secure functioning, which I admit is hard to do, is being able to take painful criticism and not do anything except hold it. It hurts. It really hurts. I get criticized as a teacher, as a therapist, and as a father. I get criticized a lot, and it hurts. But I think it takes a certain amount of understanding. Again, this idea of doing the right thing when it's the hardest to do isn't natural for us. It isn't. We're either trained into it and disciplined because of the culture that we're in, whether it's a family culture or we're in the armed forces or whatever, or we do it ourselves. Either way, it's hard because when we are under stress, we definitely want to feel good now. And so your criticism, I'll shoot first and ask questions later because I take it as a threat, as an attack. And I may not even know whether it's good or bad. I just know that it probably isn't, and good. And that's, again, the human condition, but also memory. So there's some people who are more sensitive to a certain form of speech or tone, a certain group of words, than others. And that's what you were, I think, talking about in the United States. The sensitivity rate here is really high.
Yes. Yes. To always try and make sure that raise the stage is what we might say. And
I tell you, as a teacher, it's really hard because word choices now are extremely important because we're bringing in more and more people who are from oppressed groups to come into the field, and a lot of these people have been abused, and so the sensitivity is very high to the use of certain words, and so never before in my teaching experience have I ever had this, but this is what's happening right now. Probably it'll spread where you are too.
And I think it's really, I might do a very simple exercise. I think I first saw it with Dan Siegel doing it with groups, but we used to do this in acting school. We just simply use the stimulus of yes and no. So words that have representations, and historic representations, and you could essentially you could change their body functions, their heart rate, the breathing, their sense of position, body position, their openness, their closedness, and so this is something that is very hard for us to understand if we don't hear the negativity of the words. And I got this sort of highlighted to me when I was in a different country, and I did the yes-no experiment, and it didn't work. Everybody just sort of said, "Oh, well, nothing happened." And then I realized, of course, I was saying yes and no, meaning the English words. But when I said it in the local language, then everybody went, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that," and so on and so forth. But it really highlighted the fact that, when people say, "Oh, well, that word isn't a problem word," I'm saying you cannot know what language the person is speaking, what cultural, what historic, what linguistic framework, what semantic framework this person is coming from. And
Right.
What you said is very important, and we've got a lot to learn about that.
You think about it, back in the day, hunters and gatherers, what was our vocabulary? Duck, run, lion, eat, sex, whatever, sleep. Think of the complexity of our language, and then add to that the generations of the new generation, their language, and it's a lot to kind of keep up with, and the likelihood of being misunderstood or misunderstanding is what, 99%, or and that's an exaggeration.
But I get the point.
But I think that and this is another problem with the human condition. Our communication is never good. In fact, I really think we're mostly misunderstanding each other much of the time without realizing it, because of this approximation of minds issue, and this fantasy that we're always on the same page, which never really are.
Yeah.
And you guys teach, right? You're in this field, and so how many times did you find that people didn't understand what you were talking about?
Yeah. Several.
Yeah.
So
it's.
Sorry, Matt. I just grabbed this quick, but I've got a client at the moment who's the issue is she doesn't think, she doesn't rethink. She's got a lot of past trauma that causes her to try and get that, and constantly she's saying things like, "What do you mean by that?" And the other one which fascinates me is where did you get that idea from? When I make a comment back. Right. And I say, "You said it 5 minutes ago about yourself." "Oh, did I?" This lack of not only communication to others, but really hearing and listening your own language about yourself becomes enormously difficult.
It is difficult, and I think I think people are not. I think some people have learned, to be good communicators, and understand, that it's a great effort to speak to a variety of minds. But this idea that, that in any back and forth, that two people are actually understanding precisely what the other means, is false. It takes a lot of effort to go back and forth and to error correct. And that's a problem with couples, because couples are always taking the shortest route, and think that they say something, or think that they were understood, or think that they understood, and they really don't, because we're lazy, me included.
Yeah.
And so that's a problem. By the way, memory is another problem. Perception is another problem.
Yeah, memory is a huge problem. But when it comes to feedback, because feedback is obviously the mainstay of couples therapy, and I've been there, trying to get couples to feedback to one another, and sometimes it gets very stilted and, to be honest, disingenuous. And so, what are some tips maybe on how to do feedback really well?
Feedback between partners, you mean, or
yes.
feedback?
Yes. within the dyad, the couples?
See, the way I work is they're facing each other a lot of the time. And so I'm having them on stage and having them deal with each other. And I'm primarily, or try to be as much as I can, an audience member. Otherwise, I can't take them in. I'm taking them in literally as if I were sitting in a play or a movie. And a lot of that is emotionally and how I feel at any given moment. But they're being authentic and genuine is something I can pick up right away. I pick it up as a deceptive cue. And so I'll say something about it if that's the case, or I'll check as you look at your partner's face, do you believe them? As you look at your partner's face, did that work? Does it look like that worked? No. Okay.
So you're almost like the frontal cortex, that sort of intervener doing the dorsolateral sort of
the dorsolateral, yes,
for them.
Yeah.
And this is what I was alluding to before, that because we lose track of that, we lose the confidence to use it, or the practice to use it. So you're providing that for them, that little observer's voice.
Yes.
So like a parent does that, right?
A parent does that, but also you said dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. I consider that the do the right thing area of reality testing and what is the right thing to do, not what feels expedient. But I'm checking for secure functioning. So secure functioning partners are authentic. They tell the truth. They don't hold back. Everything's out on the table. Right? Otherwise, I have a lot of work to do to get things out on the table. They are, collaborative and cooperative. So they're interacting with each other, and as soon as they go off into insecure functioning of any kind, through language, through talks, through the way they're acting and so on, then I will intervene. I'll say something about it.
I see. Yeah.
Otherwise, it's, they're doing the work. I don't go home with them. They go home with each other. They're in each other's care. And so I'm working more as a coach sometimes, or a trainer, workshopping them by putting them under stress in these little containers. Okay, I'd like it to see the two of you work this out, and you only have about 10 minutes, and I'll count down and let's see how you do.
That's and you've actually just spontaneously uttered a terrific little phrase, which is so pertinent in when working with care with couples, working with care with your couple's relationship with your client, certainly in the space, the time they're in the room, and that's in each other's care.
Yeah.
And that's the title of your new book, which we'll see in about, is coming up into next year. Is this the area? Obviously, this is the area you're talking about. That you've almost given a beautiful précis of what the book's going to be discussing.
Well, the in each other's care was actually the first. It's what spawned this whole thing in the very beginning, when I was, a student of Alan Shore's back in the day. I don't know if that even is an appropriate phrase to use. It sounds like there was buggy whips and
that's right. Yeah. We had to carry a horse to school. Yeah.
I became really interested in regulation theory, and the idea that couple therapy had it wrong, because couple therapy seemed to focus too much on self-regulation of the individuals rather than this. So this was the motion that I started to make that just sort of took off in my head. And in each other's care is this, that Richard, you're in Matthew's care. Matthew, you're in Richard's care. Therefore, I hold you, Richard, accountable for Matthew's behavior. I hold you accountable for Richard's behavior because you're supposed to be masters at each other. You're supposed to be Richard's whisperer, Matthew's whisperer, right? I expect you to be experts, have a PhD on each other because your lives depend on one another. And that gets into the interdependency thing. And I could make an argument why partners' lives really do depend on each other for health, for financial security, for safety and security, for well-being, for longevity. I can make that argument that that's a real thing. And so in each other's care is the way it's always been, and it's based on interactive regulation. It's based on that human primates we're the only species that can do interactive regulation, and particularly through the eyes. All other mammals do rough and tumble. We do through the eyes. Unless you've seen, tigers gazing at each other. I haven't yet, except in Disney.
Yeah.
And so the book is actually a collection of complaints. I decided to break it down into all the complaints that I've heard over the years, and in sections. My partner doesn't do this. My partner, and so it's systematically broken down into the dialogue and the mistakes they're making and the interaction in the dialogue on a linguistic level, then on what they could do to correct it, and so on. All of it, under the umbrella of secure functioning. Equal shared power, shared authority, two adults coming together based on terms and conditions, conditional, not unconditional. Therefore, deal or no deal. It's a deal or no deal, as unions should always be, and that's unions that last are always based on that. And so that's the book basically in a nutshell. I've never organized a book that way before. It's fun.
Sounds brilliant.
All right. It also gave us a bit of a summary, didn't it, Matt? Really, I think that last of where we've gone through the last period, and we're probably getting towards the end of our time, even though we could keep talking forever, Stan.
Yeah.
But, what do you think, Matt?
Yep, we should wrap up. Stan, any last words before we close this down?
Any last words?
Famous last words.
Yeah, be kind to your mother.
Thank my mother and my father, my wife Tracy, who I love and adore. If people want to get a hold of me, I'm at the PACT Institute, PACT, for trainings, and my wife and I do couple retreats virtually now all over the world. And we have one coming up in Spain this October at a monastery, a 5-star hotel in Spain, and we're really hoping, post kind of COVID, that will once again be face to face with people.
Oh, that's something to really look forward to. So we'll make all these. We'll have these in the show notes so that people can tap in and go and connections to the books you've already done, which is also wonderful. And then we can all sit in anticipation of the next one coming up.
Thank you, and congratulations on your wonderful book.
Oh, thank you, Stan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So we'll say for now, we'll say goodbye, and we look forward to the next time.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Stan. See you later.